Turns out the over-unders for the Minnesota Wild were actually pretty on point. We review some of the fantasy and statistical projections for many members of the Minnesota Wild today on Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day and part of your daily routine. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Charles Stuart joins us as we take a look at the overs and unders for the Minnesota Wild to see how they did in both scoring for particular players as well as the team's point total as well. My name is Seth Topal, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. As mentioned, we've got one of the regular crew back in with us here today, Charles Stuart. Postseason starts on Monday. How are we feeling on this weekend up to the playoffs?
I think we're feeling great. The Ecker injury really kills us. It kills a mood, but I'm ready for it. I can't do another round one loss. I just can't do it. We're going to smoke these Stars fans, the wannabe North Stars. They're not us. I think we're going to cook them. We have to. Vibes are high.
Vibes are high, and I love the confidence, as we'll hear in just all of our playoff content coming for you starting on Monday. Joel Eriksson skating, so there is a glimmer of hope for him being able to come back at some point in the series, which would be big for the old Wild. But let's just start with the team. Total points. The over-under numbers were right around 101, had them at 101.5 in some spots, and the Wild end up with 103. How surprised were you that it was that close, for one, and that the Wild did end up actually going over the projection? Vegas, I think, had them at 103, but there are a couple of other spots that have at a 101.5, 102. How surprised were you that that number ended up being as close to what they actually ended up with?
Yeah, any sports bettor knows that Vegas, they're perfect. I mean, there's no margin of error for them. So I'm not incredibly shocked they were able to guess it pretty much spot on. But you got to give the Wild a lot of credit. Kirill went down. We all thought the season was just going to go into absolute rubbish. But we turned it around. Everyone showed up. Boldy showed up. And we proved everyone wrong. We just kept on cooking, kept grinding, head down. Gustafsson was an absolute tank when we needed him to be. And I guess we got paid for it.
Yeah, it ended up with a season that was not quite the level of success as last year. But when you lose as many goals as the Wild did, it's going to happen. Now, 305 last year. Were you surprised that the Wild ended up with fewer than 250 goals as a team so far? That's a large drop. Were you surprised at how much of a drop there was in goals scored this season?
Honestly, I mean that's a big drop, but we have to understand that the chemistry of the team, with Fiala going out, we didn't really understand what this identity was. I expected them when we did our over-under pods at the start of the year that we were going to be right around that same point, maybe a little less, but not by this margin. So there was, of course, just you needed to build that chemistry. And then when Johansson came, we're starting to pick it up. But am I concerned? No. Would have I liked more goals? Sure. But like I said, we got some wins. We got the points we needed. So I can't complain.
Yeah, and it's not like they just gave up the same amount of goals, didn't score as many. There was a there was a solid drop in the number of goals given up, as well as the Wild finished with 219 goals allowed. And you may look at ESPN and say, well, how come ESPN is saying that they gave up, I believe it was 225? We're throwing the shootout goals out because apparently ESPN counts those and they don't count. So we're throwing those out. So 219 given up after the Wild gave up somewhere around 240, 245 last year. So they did make some strides there as well to kind of bridge the gap a little bit. And I don't know if that's necessarily a surprise, because with the lesser amount of goals scored, you expected the team was going to shore things up defensively to offset some of that, right?
Yeah, you do. And I mean, I guess it's always better to score more goals than you let in. I mean, just duh, but I'm happy we did it. And by a sizable margin as well. I mean, it's what we needed to do. It's what needed to happen. And through the leadership of Kirill just going out and having a night every night, and Boldy having a night every night. Of course, minus I think it was February where he had a little rough patch, but we got through it. And we're going to go in through this series with, like I said, immaculate vibes, and we're going to pound these Stars into the dirt.
We'll take a look at the individual projections, because it turns out they were almost shockingly accurate this season. We're talking fantasy projections as a way to just gauge kind of what to expect from particular Wild players. Yeah, as I said, turns out they were pretty shockingly accurate. So we'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after a word from our sponsors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Continuing today's episode of Locked On Wild, once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, Locked On NHL is here to guide you up until the postseason starts on Monday. Going to be an absolutely unreal ride, so make sure to follow along with Locked On NHL to keep you up to date on all things in the NHL as we handle the Minnesota Wild. Seth Topal joined by Charles Stuart today, taking a look at overs and unders for particular members of the Minnesota Wild. Let's move to some of the drivers of the offense, and we'll start with the big one. Kirill Kaprizov, projected to have 97 points, 44 goals, 52 assists, and obviously he got hurt, finished the season with 67 games, ended up having 75 points, 40 goals, 35 assists. Charles, do you think he would have exceeded the 44 goal plateau and the 100-point mark had he played a full season?
Yeah, I think he absolutely slaughters that 44 goal mark. Kirill was he was really cooking. I mean, if I don't know another way to put it, he was a man on a mission. He was not going to miss the playoffs this year, and I think 44 goals. Wait, he ended with 40, right?
Yes,
he's right there. All it takes is one of those games where he has 2 goals. And points wise, it's a little bit tougher, but 4 more goals with all those games he missed, I think that's cake. It's easy.
Yeah, I think he definitely could have exceeded that goals mark. Points, it was tough because for a while he was kind of doing the whole thing by himself, which meant scoring the goals not necessarily assisting on the goals because he's like, you know what, I'm just going to take the puck and do it myself. So assists, probably not. Points, would have been tough, but no, 4 goals the rest of the season. He could easily have exceeded that.
Yeah, and with Sam Steele, I mean, there was that little stint with him at the first, the 1C. I mean, I don't know how if you're Kirill, you're like, I'm going to go past this guy and go get an assist. I mean, it's just not.
Yeah,
It's just not
sometimes
possible.
it's better to just take care of things yourself. If you want it done right, do it yourself.
Exactly, and he did that. He did that until he got hurt.
He sure did.
Zucchi, I think we'll probably cover him. I mean, I think his numbers are all this like similar to what Vegas said. So I mean, he didn't have like a bad year per se, but I mean, it's Kirill. We expect him to take over, and we need him to.
You expect him to take the lead. Perfect segue because Matt Zuccarello is actually next on the list. And for Zuccarello, he was pegged for 67 points, at least by these projections. You know, projections tend to fluctuate from place to place, but projected for 67 points, 20 goals, 47 assists. And if we look at the numbers, he ended up with 22 goals, 45 assists for a total of 67 points. And so basically right on the button for what he was projected to have. But again, with what he did last year, which was going to be the third member of the team to break the points mark in a single season before he got hurt, felt like a little bit of a, maybe not a down year, but a slow, cold finish to the season for Zuccarello.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that you can, I don't want to say blame because the injury wasn't Kaprizov's fault, but when Zucchi isn't with his best bud, Kirill, it's tough to see his production numbers to skyrocket up. I mean, he can't absolutely take over like Kirill can. So I'm not shocked his numbers were down a little bit, but I think he's just got to turn around in the playoffs just to kind of prove everyone wrong that he's still our guy. He's still the first line guy.
Yeah, he's just got to get that comfort back, and I think his production will pick up. So having a season that basically was right on what he was projected for, it's fine. This is why Vegas does this, because they're really good at it. Because the next one that we have is Matt Boldy. Now this one is going to look a little different because at least by these projections, he was expected to get just under 24 goals, 35 assists, and 59.5 points this season. Now, before Kirill got hurt, it looked like he was going to finish under that. Kirill got hurt, 12 goals in March, and then he finishes the season with 31 goals, 32 assists, 63 points. So, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Boldy with a perfect example of finding a way to get it done when it looks like it's not going to happen. He just cruised through the final part of the season to get those numbers where we were hoping they would be.
Yeah, and as we saw last year and the year before with Vegas and the Blues, they're all going to put their attention on Kirill. So we need Boldy to not pull a Kevin Fiala and absolutely disappear. We need him to be March Matt Boldy and not February Matt Boldy, where you're scoring 0 goals. We need the Matt Boldy who I think you just said over 30 goals this year. We need the absolute scorer. Thanks to Mojo, he's really unlocked Boldy, kind of like what happened with Boldy and Kevin Fiala. But we need that line to be absolutely destroying.
Yeah. Need them to hum. Need them to just keep things firing along to keep up with those Dallas Stars. Let's talk about one more big one, and then we will save most of the rest of these for the end of the show. Let's talk about Ryan Hartman, projected for 24.7 goals, 28.1 assists, 52.8 points. He did not quite get there. 15 goals, 22 assists, 37 points for Hartman in 59 games. He was hurt. He was demoted off of the top line. It was a journey for Ryan Hartman this year. And then you look at it and you're like, well, he's still found a way to get to 15 goals. So just the full experience of everything that can happen in the season for Ryan Hartman this year.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, we saw him get demoted to the third line, fourth line, and he was, for lack of a better word, terrible. He really, really was struggling with penalty minutes, and it was killing the team. It was hurting the team. Dean was fed up, but we eventually got back that first line that we had last year. We found some magic with it. And like you said, fighting your way to 15 goals after being hurt and struggling all that time, I mean, credit to him, honestly.
Yeah, just a great job of getting it back. It's a good that's the good theme for Ryan Hartman this year was finding a way to get it back and finishing the season on a strong note to get to those 15 goals. Let's do one more, and then we can talk about a couple of defensemen and goaltenders to finish the show. Joel Eriksson was projected this year for 25.8 goals, 23.7 assists, 49.5 points. Unfortunately for Eriksson, he got hurt, and the hope is that he will be able to return at some point during this series against the Dallas Stars. But Eriksson did finish the season with 23 goals, 38 assists, and 61 points. Joel Eriksson, like clockwork, just continues to find ways to improve his game on a season-by-season basis. Career high in points this year, and so he finds a way, despite not quite getting to that number of goals, still finds a way to exceed his projections for points without playing the final few games.
Yeah, and he did this all with the grief line that we saw for the past 2 years dominating. We saw it without that line. I mean, Jordan Greenway's gone, and Foligno is not as dominant as he was before, I should say. And he got there, like Hartman, like Boldy. I mean, he figured out a way, and I'm really happy he did because he's an absolute workhorse. There's all these stories of Dean and Billy G talking about how he's like first one in, first one out, or last one out of the weight room. He's always on the ice skating, trying, and he's always in front of the net doing the dirty work. So good for him. He's getting paid in terms of goals and assists and points, career high in points for doing the dirty work, as he should. I mean, good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one of those key components for this team, and one that we're gonna miss at least until he's ready to return, which hopefully will be game 1. But I'm not holding my breath. No, it'll be more. I would imagine I'm going to, just because I can, I'm going to set game 5 as kind of an estimation, a guesstimation of when he is able to return to the series, which, if the Wild lose in 4, does us no good.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, when the Wild sweep the Stars, I mean, I guess he'll be ready for game 1, but no, I really hope he can come back, and he deserves to come back. Like you said, he's playing so well, and we're starting to figure out this lineup. It'd be terrible if we lost before we can get a fully healthy lineup out there to prove what we really have. And it'd be a classic Minnesota move to underperform in the playoffs and not give Eriksson that chance to rejoin his line mates. But I just have a good feeling this year. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I live in Texas and all these Stars fans are overly cocky about playing the Wild. I'd love to see them lose, but I have a good feeling about it this year. I do.
You, like the Black Eyed Peas, have a feeling.
I do. I mean, I know it's hard to believe. It really is. But if you're a Minnesota fan, you kind of knew last year, all right, the Blues had our number. Year before that, I mean, Fleury played lights out game 1. We won game 1 against Vegas, but he was good. And he killed us. And we kind of knew after game 2 and after game 3 that we weren't going to win that series. I think if I took a poll of Minnesota fans against the Stars this year, I know they cooked us, I think, a few years ago in the playoffs, but I got us this year. I actually believe in us.
I like it. I like the confidence. We'll see how it plays out starting Monday. But let's finish. We've got some defensemen and a couple of goalies to discuss with their projections for this season. We'll finish all that up after this here on Locked On Wild. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, Locked On NHL is ready to rock for you to give you a full look at everything going on with the postseason starting up on Monday. Locked On NHL, free and available wherever you listen to your podcast, just like Locked On Wild. Make sure you subscribe everywhere you can on social media as well, so you don't miss out on any content leading up to the postseason. All right, defenseman time. Jared Spurgeon. Spurgeon was projected to have a pretty solid amount of points for a defenseman this year. Was pegged for 11 goals, 29 assists, 40 points on the season for the captain. He did end up with 11 goals. He had 23 assists, so 34 points. So he did miss the point total by a little bit, but still very solid season for the captain.
Oh, yeah. Jared Spurgeon, you watch the games and you see this man do everything that doesn't show up on the score sheet. I mean, of course, block shots too, but I mean, he's laying down the body and he's covering for whoever his defensive partner is, whether it's Middleton or if it's someone else. I mean, Jared Spurgeon has been wonderful this year, and especially with the roller coaster our defense has been. It's been a rough ride sometimes, but hopefully we can steady the ship in the playoffs. And we're going to be leaning on Spurgeon and Brodin pretty heavily on their own respective lines, or I guess pairings, to do God's work and carry.
Yeah, and people may forget too, at the beginning of the season, the defensemen were contributing like not at all offensively because there were so many issues on the back end that they were not able to step into the play as much because, and this was a product of the offense too, offense not holding the puck as much as they did last year. Like the Wild were a dominant possession team last year, which allowed the defensemen to step into the play so much. This year they weren't, so the defensemen were having to be essentially 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And that just, the point totals for pretty much all of the defensemen minus Spurgeon were way down. Obviously, Kalen Addison finished the year with 29 points, which was a real solid number in those 62 games that he played. But Middleton, 15 points, and he's not an offensive guy, but still. Matt Dumba had 14. Jonas Brodin had 14. So those guys who are maybe more like 30-point guys, cut that in half because they just were more focused on the defensive end, as they should be. But that just shows you how all of those points, all those goals can kind of evaporate just with little stuff like that happening along the way too.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, it's not completely the defense's fault. I mean, if you're holding the puck in the possession, you're passing it around, you're involving everyone. But like you said, at the start of the year, we were dumping it in, and then we'd send two forwards after it, and we'd be losing these puck battles. Then as soon as our defenders got crossed that second blue line, we'd be like, oh, well, we don't have the puck anymore. We'd have to skate right out of the zone. And I don't think Matt Dumba sometimes got the memo of, hey, we got to get back on defense. I'm going to step into this play. And that's where he gets a lot of his haters come after him for it. But hopefully he won't have to give up any odd man rushes in the playoffs. But just to kind of bring home the defenseman, I think we ended the year well. We still don't know if it's going to be Faber. I hope it is. I hope Faber and Klingberg can put on a clinic in the playoffs. He deserves it, especially after that loss, which I'm still salty about. But I bet Faber is too. But
oh yeah,
I think our defense has really picked up, and as long as the trend is going up, it has this year. I mean, of course, it has to go up after our slow start, but good for us for turning around.
We do have to do one player at least that did not hit those points projections for this year. It's Dumba. Here's what he was projected. 9 goals, 22 assists, 31 points. Finished with 4 goals, 10 assists. But this is something it's not new to anybody that has watched this team. He's not the same player that he was. He doesn't have that same shot, doesn't really have the ability to do all of those things offensively that he used to. And so it's really, I don't think it's a surprise that he didn't hit those types of marks, because those were the marks that Dumba of old was hitting with points and with goals. And he just isn't that guy anymore.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a pain to say it, but I mean, it's true. I mean, sometimes you'll see a really nice play from Dumba. I don't endorse absolutely crapping on this man 24/7. I mean, he has some good plays. He will lay down his body or he lay a nice hit on someone, but sometimes the mistakes overpower his good plays in some games, and that's when he really gets to the brunt end of the stick. He just gets hit or knocked off the puck, and then it's a 2-on-1, and Brodin has to cover both of them, or Gustafsson or Fleury's trying to make a sprawling save, and it just doesn't work sometimes. So we just need a sound defensive play from all 6 defensemen, and we'll be good. We just got to play together.
Yeah, just got to play as a team. Now the goalies, the final ones we'll talk about, and it's really a story of one player having just an insane year as to why the numbers look the way they did. So the projection for Filip Gustavsson is something. But let's be honest, we didn't really know what we were getting from him coming into the season. So these projections, I guess, should not be that much of a surprise, because you didn't really know what to expect, but he was projected to be 16, 9, and 3, a 2.85 goals against average, a 908 save percentage, also projected to have a shutout. Here's what he ended up with. He ended up making 39 starts, 39 games, not necessarily starts. He did have a couple games he came in relief. 22, 9, and 7, a 2.10 goals against average, a 931 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. So I think safe to say Filip Gustavsson was the one that exceeded his projections the most on this Wild team.
Yeah, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one at that. Filip Gustavsson, I think every Minnesota Wild fan was very skeptical after that whole Cameron Talbot debacle and mess after the playoffs, but he has been, I mean, all aboard the Gus bus. I mean, this man has been cooking for us. And I feel like the Wild play better when he's in goal. They just have some sort of confidence in him. Not that Fleury is a bad goalie, or not that he shouldn't get to start in game 1, but we just look like a more sound team defensively when Gustafsson is back there. He will hold the puck, and he won't make sprawling saves. He doesn't really have that big bouncer or deflect into the corner. He'll just swallow up the puck, and it'll be a face-off time for Ek to win. I mean, I guess now that Ek's hurt, it hurts a little bit, but you know what I mean. We'll get face-off opportunities instead of big rebounds to whoever's sitting right in front of goal.
Yeah, it does make a difference, especially in the postseason, where every missed corralled rebound, every rebound that deflects free seems like it's magnified. So I'm fully on board Filip Gustavsson in game 1. I would hope that's the route that is gone, but we'll dissect that fully for you as the week unfolds. Fleury's numbers. Now, Fleury's numbers not hitting this mark can be attributed to how good Gustafsson was. Fleury was projected for 53 starts, 30, 16, and 6, a 2.63 goals against average, a 915 save percentage. He ended up with 46 games, 24, 16, and 4, a 2.85 goals against average, and a 908 save percentage. But Charles, as you alluded to, Gustafsson was the rock the whole season. Fleury had some opportunities where if I could figure out which way to make the waves go, He had some opportunities where he was really, really good. He stole some games, but he also had some others where you're like, boy, oh boy, those 4 goals should probably all have been saves. And so I think the experience as a whole, just a little more high and low, as opposed to Gustafsson, who just was steady all season.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, we needed it. And if you go back to last year, you saw Cameron Talbot get hurt, and Capo Kakinen came in, and he was just like, all right, it's my time to shine, and he went off. And the Wild needed every single one of those games he played, and he was our rock. He really was. But then we get Gustafsson this year, a man we don't really know much about coming from Ottawa, and he comes in and he steadies the ship. He has some great games. I think he was projected 1 shutout, like you said, and he got 3. I mean, he has played tremendously. And I think I've got to agree with you. I think he takes game 1, and maybe it doesn't work, but maybe it does. And I think he's just our guy going forward. Fleury, a former Vezina Trophy winner, and a few years ago. But I just think you got to go with Gustafsson.
Yeah, roll with the Gus bus, but if things go south, you have Fleury in relief to be able to come in and try to help steady the ship. So all in all, a season that was an eventful one, but you had some players that were able to exceed their projections, and unfortunately some guys that didn't quite hit theirs. So there you have it, the projections for how the regular season was going to go and how it ended up actually going. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Wild. Reminder, we've got the full gambit of postseason content for you coming up tomorrow with a full 5-person playoff panel taking a look at every single angle for this series. We'll also talk with Kevin Gorg for an episode. We've got a crossover with Locked On Stars and Dane Lewis. We got a ton of content for you coming up starting tomorrow. So make sure to dial in, and we'll get you through the postseason in true Locked On Wild fashion by covering every single angle of everything. So make sure, if you haven't already, you follow along with the show so you don't miss out on any of our new episodes. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast platforms and on social media as well, so you can stay tuned as the Minnesota Wild start the postseason on Monday. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday and anytime else as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.